How to stop being insecure starts now, because your insecurity is not a lack of strength. It is an excess of ego pretending to protect you while it suffocates you. And you feel this every time you have to decide something simple and freeze. Every time you seek approval. Every time you change who you are so you won't be rejected. The ego lives on noise, haste, and comparison. It calls itself prudence, but it is fear. It calls itself caution, but it is cowardice. And you accept it because it hurts less than facing the truth. You don't trust your soul because you have never been silent long enough to hear it. Rumi went through this, and Sufism holds up the same cruel mirror. While you cling to the image you created of yourself, the soul remains buried, and insecurity is the symptom of this daily betrayal. The ego wants control, wants guarantees, wants applause, and that is why it keeps you small, asking permission to exist. And the more you obey, the more ridiculous this character becomes, a character who needs to be accepted just to breathe. The soul does not shout, it calls softly. And you do not hear it because you prefer the ego's drama. You prefer familiar pain to the simple truth that would free you now. The false belief that keeps you trapped is thinking that confidence comes from getting things right, when in reality confidence is born from obeying the right voice, even while trembling. That is why Rumi speaks of dying before dying. It is not the death of the body, but the fall of this false self that lives on fear. When you stop negotiating with the ego and begin to act from what is true within you, insecurity loses its footing, because it only exists while you ask permission to be who you are. Do this now. When doubt arises, do not argue, do not compare, do not ask for advice. Feel the body, the breath, the tightness in the chest that exposes the ego, and choose the step that brings inner relief, even if it scares you. This is the simple sign of the soul. This video is different because it will not teach you techniques to appear confident. It will corner you until you admit that insecurity is a daily choice not to listen to your own soul. And if you stay, you will feel the exact moment when the ego loses authority and confidence is born effortlessly. And here is the revelation that exposes you. If this message reached you, it is because you are already tired of betraying yourself. The soul is asking for space now, not later, not when you are ready. Write in the comments, "I choose to listen to my soul now," and become a member to access even deeper content and continue crossing this process without turning back. You call it insecurity, but its real name is repeated inner betrayal, because every time your soul whispers a simple, true path, you interrupt it to listen to the ego screaming fear, and then pretend not to understand why you feel weak, small, and always late in your own life. The ego feeds on this hesitation. It grows when you postpone, when you ask for opinions, when you hide behind, "I don't know yet." Meanwhile, the soul watches in silence, waiting for you to tire of obeying this inner jailer disguised as prudence. Rumi was not speaking about strengthening the personality. He pointed straight to the root. While you live to protect an image, the soul remains in exile, and insecurity becomes the daily price of that exile. The truth that unsettles you is simple, and that is why the ego hates it. You are not insecure because you are weak. You are insecure because you try to be something you are not. Every insecurity is born at the exact second you abandon your truth to fit an external expectation. The ego promises acceptance but delivers anxiety, promises safety but keeps you on constant alert, promises control but paralyzes you. The soul promises nothing. It only points to the next living step, and that is frightening because it comes with no guarantees. Rumi insisted on this. Whoever trusts the soul walks in the dark, but walks whole. You feel the difference in the body, and pretend you don't. The ego tightens, weighs down, accelerates, creates false urgency. The soul relieves, even when it asks for courage. But you were trained to choose the tightening because you confuse tension with responsibility. Insecurity grows exactly there, when you learn to distrust relief and worship fear. Sufism does not negotiate with this. As long as you do not abandon the habit of obeying fear, you will keep asking for strength and never finding it. You do not lack strength, you lack honesty. The ego wants you to think more, analyze more, wait more. It knows that if you stop to feel, it loses the throne. That is why it turns everything into a mental problem, endless doubt, catastrophic scenarios. The soul does not argue, it points. And you know when it is the soul because it does not come as a beautiful speech, but as a silent certainty that does not need to justify itself. Insecurity is born when you ignore that call and then try to convince yourself you did the right thing. The body does not believe it, and anxiety appears to expose the lie. Rumi spoke of the courage to undress inwardly, because while you wear masks, you must constantly check whether they are still in place. That exhausts you. That makes you sick. That creates this feeling of always being late for your own life. The ego keeps you insecure because insecurity keeps you dependent on approval, on external signs, on someone saying, "It will work out." The soul does not ask for permission. It asks for surrender. And that is exactly what the ego calls madness. You do not trust your soul because you have never truly tested it. You listened a little and then ran outside to ask for confirmation. And when something went wrong, you blamed intuition, when in truth you did not have the courage to follow it all the way. The ego uses these episodes as false proof that trusting yourself is dangerous. Rumi dismantles this with cruel precision. It was not the soul that failed, it was your half-surrender. Insecurity is born from this abandonment midway. Notice how the ego plays the victim. It says it only wants to protect you, that the world is harsh, that you must adapt. But behind this speech lies an ugly truth. It is afraid of disappearing. Because the instant you trust the inner voice, the character loses its function. The soul needs no drama, no justification, no audience, and the ego starves in that silence. That is why it creates constant noise inside your head. Insecurity is the most visible symptom of this inner war. It is not a defect. It is a signal, a warning that you are living off-center. Sufism does not teach you to fix the symptom. It forces you to look at the cause. As long as you try to strengthen the ego to feel safe, you will only refine the prison. Rumi points to the opposite path. Weaken the false self, and confidence arises on its own, without effort, without technique. You want confidence without risk, but that does not exist. The soul only speaks when you accept not knowing the outcome. The ego wants maps, forecasts, control. The soul wants presence. And every time you choose presence, even trembling, something aligns within. That is when insecurity begins to crumble. Not because you became more capable, but because you stopped dividing yourself. Inner division is the true source of fear. Notice how you rehearse life instead of living it. You imagine conversations, anticipate rejection, create answers ahead of time. This is the ego trying to avoid exposure. The soul does not rehearse. It enters. And that is why the ego says listening to the soul is imprudent. Rumi called this living faith, acting from inner truth without needing the world to agree. Insecurity disappears when you stop negotiating your truth for comfort. You are taught to distrust yourself and call that maturity. But real maturity is stopping the abandonment of yourself. The ego confuses humility with self-erasure, caution with fear, adaptation with betrayal. The soul does not compete, compare, or diminish itself. It simply is. And when you act from that place, fear does not disappear, but it loses authority. It becomes background noise, no longer command. The ego needs you to believe you are not ready yet. Something is always missing: more money, more approval, more certainty. This "not yet" is the invisible leash. The soul does not wait for perfect conditions. It acts in the imperfect now. Rumi insisted on this because he knew the now is the only place where the ego has no power. And every time you choose the true now, insecurity loses a piece of territory. You envy those who seem confident, but what you envy is not courage, it is wholeness. Confident people are not more intelligent, they are less divided. They make mistakes, they fall, but they do not abandon themselves. The ego convinced you that failure is unforgivable because it survives on the image of getting it right. The soul has no image to protect. That is why it moves lightly. That is why Rumi spoke of dancing in the middle of the fire. Every time you ask for one more sign, one more confirmation, one more push, you are telling yourself you do not trust yourself. And the body learns this message. Insecurity installs itself as habit. Sufism is brutally simple. Stop asking outside for what can only be born within. Confidence is not built, it is revealed when you stop lying to yourself. The ego wants you to feel special for suffering. It turns pain into identity. The soul wants you to pass through. Insecurity grows when you start defining yourself by fear. I am like this, you say, and the ego applauds. Rumi dismantles this mercilessly. You are not the fear you feel. You are the space that perceives it. As long as you forget this, you will keep trying to fix something that was never you. There is an exact moment when you know what to do and choose not to do it. That is the sacred point you avoid looking at. Insecurity is born there. Not before, not after. Right there. And as long as you lack the courage to face that instant, you will keep seeking sophisticated answers for a simple problem. The ego pulls you away from that point because it dies there. The soul calls you there because you are born there. Rumi did not offer comfort, he offered truth. He knew that real confidence does not come from feeling strong. It comes from stopping the flight. Fleeing silence, fleeing your own truth, fleeing the inner call. The ego calls this survival. The soul calls it prison. And you feel the difference every night when you lay your head down and the body does not relax. You want to stop being insecure? Then stop protecting yourself from what you already know. Insecurity will not leave while you keep negotiating with fear. It only yields when you choose the soul, even with a racing heart. That is what frightens you. That is what frees you. And this is exactly where most people give up, because the ego still seems safer than the living truth that Rumi pointed to, without mercy. Now observe what happens inside you as you read this. The discomfort, the resistance, the urge to disagree. That is the ego feeling seen. It knows this path does not strengthen the image, it dissolves it. And you feel afraid because you were never taught how to exist without a character. But there is something deeper in you that recognizes these words not as an idea, but as a memory. And that recognition does not come from the mind. Insecurity begins to die the moment you stop explaining yourself. When you act simply, directly, aligned, without apologizing for existing. The soul does not need validation. The ego does. And as long as you confuse the two, you will remain trapped in this cycle. Rumi did not call this self-confidence. He called it a return home. And perhaps the question still echoing is, what in you still insists on not returning? You feel insecurity as an old weight because it has become routine, a borrowed identity, and the ego loves it when you say, "This is just how I am," because then it never has to be questioned. Every time you define yourself by doubt, you strengthen the jailer that keeps you small. Rumi was not speaking about self-esteem. He was speaking about returning to what is real. And the real does not ask permission to exist. The soul does not explain itself. It manifests. The ego explains itself constantly because it knows it is not solid. And you feel this every time you have to justify each simple choice in your life. Insecurity is not born when something goes wrong. It is born earlier, in the moment you begin negotiating your truth to avoid discomfort. The ego convinced you that avoiding pain is wisdom, when in fact it is escape. The soul accepts risk because it knows the greatest danger is abandoning yourself. Rumi insisted on this point. Whoever trusts the inner voice may fall, but falls whole. Whoever obeys the ego never falls, but never walks. And you feel this stagnation as a tiredness without reason. Notice how the ego uses the past against you. It takes old mistakes and repeats them as a sentence. See? Don't trust. But Sufism does not look backward to punish itself. It looks backward to let go. The soul carries no history. It responds to the now. Insecurity grows when you try to fix yesterday instead of listening to today. The ego lives on memory. The soul lives on presence. And every act of presence weakens fear. You think you need more clarity, but what you need is more honesty. Clarity has already come many times. You simply did not have the courage to obey it. The ego calls this prudence so it will not be exposed. Rumi pointed out the absurdity of this. Truth does not fully reveal itself to those who only act when everything is guaranteed. The soul speaks first. The path opens afterward. And this humiliates the ego because it loses control of the script. Insecurity is also fed by the habit of comparison. The ego measures, calculates, ranks. It always finds someone better, more confident, more advanced, to diminish you. The soul does not compare because it does not compete. It knows your exact step. When you abandon your step to imitate another, insecurity appears as an alarm. It is not failure, it is a warning. Rumi called this drifting away from your own center. You were taught to trust external noise more than inner silence. That is why silence frightens you. Without noise, the ego loses its weapons. The soul speaks in empty space, in the gap between thoughts. Insecurity increases when you flee that space, when you fill life with distractions to avoid hearing what you already know. Sufism does not distract, it empties. And the ego calls this danger. Every time you ask for too many opinions, you teach yourself that you do not trust yourself. The body learns it, the mind learns it. Insecurity becomes a learned habit. Rumi did not say to reject the world, but not to hand it the command of your life. The soul does not need consensus. The ego does. And the more validation you seek, the weaker you feel afterward. This cycle is not broken by positive thinking. It is broken by choice. There is a part of you that knows exactly what to do, and another that is terrified of losing the character. Insecurity is the battlefield between these two forces. The ego threatens rejection, abandonment, failure. The soul responds with a firm silence that says, "Even so." Rumi spoke of this simple courage, Mike, not heroic, not loud, the courage to be faithful to what is alive within. You confuse insecurity with lack of preparation, when often it is excess preparation meant to avoid action. The ego keeps you studying, planning, waiting for the right moment. The soul asks for a step now, an imperfect step. And every step obeyed strengthens something in you that no technique can build. Confidence is born after movement, not before. This destroys the ego's logic, which is why it resists so fiercely. Insecurity also grows when you live playing a role. Roles must be maintained, defended, corrected. That is exhausting. The soul does not perform, it expresses. Rumi spoke of authenticity as devotion, not as style. Being true is not being aggressive, it is being whole. And wholeness dissolves insecurity because there is no space left for fear to hide. The ego feeds on the idea that you need to become someone. The soul reminds you that you need to return. Return to what you feel when you are not trying to please, impress, or prove. This return is frightening because it removes the ground from under the character. Insecurity is the ego's last resort to keep you in orbit. It says, if you are truly yourself, something bad will happen, and you believe it because you have never tested it to the end. Rumi spoke of trust as surrender, not as certainty. Surrender to the next true step, even without a map. The ego calls this irresponsibility. The soul calls it life. You feel this difference in the body. Fear contracts, truth expands, even when it hurts. And every expansion weakens insecurity, because insecurity only lives in contraction. You want to eliminate insecurity without abandoning control. That is impossible. While control rules, fear governs. The soul does not control. It responds. It responds to what is real, not to what is imagined. Insecurity grows when you live inside scenarios that do not exist. Sufism pulls you back into the now like a shock. Here, the ego loses strength. Notice how the ego keeps you busy with yourself. What people think of you, how you look, how you will be seen. The soul does not orbit itself. It moves toward what is true. When you shift the focus from, how do I look, to, is this true? Something organizes itself. Insecurity diminishes because the reference changes. You stop measuring yourself by another's gaze. You do not need to get rid of fear to trust the soul. You need to stop obeying it. Fear can come along, but it cannot drive. Rumi did not promise the absence of fear. He promised inner freedom, the freedom not to betray yourself. And that freedom has a price, losing the ego's approval. It will complain, shout, create new doubts. That is a sign you are on the right path. Insecurity tries to convince you that you are fragile, but real fragility is living disconnected from what is true. The soul is simple, firm, silent. It does not need to impose itself. When you listen to it, something in you relaxes, and that relaxation is proof the ego cannot counterfeit. The body recognizes alignment. You look for confidence as if it were something outside, but confidence is the side effect of inner fidelity. Each time you choose the soul, even in small things, something strengthens. The ego loses arguments. Insecurity loses space, not all at once, but consistently. Rumi spoke of constancy, not emotional explosions. The path is simple. The ego, is what complicates it. There comes a point when you must choose between appearing secure and being true. Appearing secure feeds the character. Being true feeds the soul. Insecurity is born when you choose appearance. Confidence is born when you choose truth. There is no shortcut. Sufism does not offer spiritual makeup, it offers undressing. Now, as this echoes, something in you already knows the next step you have been avoiding. The ego tries to distract, relativize, postpone. The soul simply waits. And this waiting is not passive, it is firm. It knows that the moment you obey, even with fear, something old will begin to die. And perhaps the question that keeps burning is, what in you still prefers familiar insecurity to the living truth that insists on calling you now? You wake up, and insecurity is already sitting beside you, because the ego never sleeps. It watches, calculates, compares, anticipates, and calls this care while stealing your presence. The soul wakes up silently, whole, unhurried, and you ignore it because the ego taught you that silence is danger. Rumi pointed to this mistake without detours. Whoever flees silence flees themselves. Insecurity is the price of that escape. It does not appear out of nowhere. It is built every time you choose noise instead of truth. The ego wants you to feel incomplete, always lacking, always owing something to the world. It turns every choice into a test, every gesture into a judgment. The soul does not test, it lives. When you try to live as a test, insecurity grows like mold in a sealed room. Sufism insists on opening inner windows, not decorating the prison. Rumi spoke of love as the courage to exist without apologizing. The ego hates this because it loses the power to blame you. You call it social, emotional, or professional insecurity, but they all share the same root: fear of being seen without a mask. The ego convinced you that the mask is who you are. The soul knows the mask is weight. Every time you adjust it, you move a little farther from your own center. And the farther from the center you are, the more insecure you feel. It is not a mystery. It is simple inner mechanics that the ego pretends not to understand. The ego creates stories to justify its cowardice. It says the timing is not right, that you need more preparation, that it is not time yet. The soul speaks in the present tense. Now. This now is frightening because it has no shield. Rumi taught entering the now as one enters fire, knowing the false cannot survive. Insecurity is the alarm of the false self trying to escape the flames. Notice how you think too much before acting, and then regret not having acted. The ego calls this caution, but it is fear dressed as reason. The soul asks for a simple, small, true gesture. When you ignore it, insecurity settles in as a mute guilt. You feel it, but cannot explain it. Sufism does not ask for explanation, it asks for honesty. And honesty hurts because it dismantles comfortable narratives. You do not trust your soul because you confuse the soul with passing emotion. The ego loves this confusion. Emotion shouts and changes. The soul is firm and constant. You know when it is the soul because it does not ask for applause, does not seek advantage, does not negotiate values. Insecurity is born when you trade this firmness for convenience. Rumi pointed to this as the loss of inner direction. Without direction, any wind becomes a threat. The ego wants you to feel special for suffering. It turns insecurity into a deep identity. This is just how I am, you say, and it smiles. The soul does not want identity, it wants truth. And truth is often too simple for the ego to accept. Simple as saying no where you always said yes. Simple as stopping the explanations. Each of these simplicities weakens insecurity because it cuts off its source. You live trying to protect yourself from judgment, but it is you who judge yourself constantly. The ego is an inner courtroom that never closes. The soul does not judge, it observes. When you replace judgment with observation, something relaxes. Rumi spoke of this softness as real strength. Insecurity cannot survive softness because it needs tension to exist. Where there is true relaxation, fear does not rule. The ego keeps you looking outward because it knows that if you look inward without distraction, it loses its disguise. That is why it creates false urgencies, future worries, past regrets. The soul is always here. Insecurity grows when you abandon the here. Sufism does not take you far away, it brings you back. And this return is uncomfortable because it reveals how far you have drifted. You were taught to trust methods, formulas, steps. The soul does not fit into a method. It asks for listening. Listening requires silence, and silence requires courage. The ego calls this emptiness to scare you. Rumi called it sacred space. Insecurity is fear of that space, because in it the character has no function. Without a function, the ego panics. Notice how the ego promises future security in exchange for your present freedom. Later you will live, it says. The soul does not accept life in installments. It calls now, and every postponement creates more insecurity because you prove to yourself that you do not respond. It is not real incapacity, it is a habit of escape. Rumi dismantled this by inviting life without guarantees, because the greatest guarantee is not betraying yourself. Insecurity is also born from trying to control how others see you. That is impossible and exhausting. The ego insists because it needs that control to exist. The soul does not worry about image. When you release image, something organizes itself inside. It is not magic, it is inner coherence. And coherence generates natural confidence, not performance. You feel tightness when you ignore the soul and relief when you follow it, even when things go wrong. That relief is the proof the ego tries to disqualify. It says it is irresponsible to feel that way, but the body knows. Rumi trusted the body as a sign of lived truth, not thought truth. Insecurity grows when you learn to distrust your own feeling. The ego turns every mistake into identity. See who you are? The soul sees error as adjustment. While you define yourself by error, insecurity becomes permanent. When you adjust without punishment, it loses strength. Sufism does not humiliate the person, it humiliates the false self. And that is liberating even when it hurts. You do not need to eliminate the ego, you need to remove it from command. It can speak, but it cannot decide. The soul decides. This inversion is what Rumi pointed to as returning to the heart. Heart here is not weak emotion, it is center. Without center, everything threatens. With center, nothing dominates. Insecurity is a sign that the center has been abandoned. Notice how you feel when you try to please and when you are true. One weighs down, the other expands. The ego convinced you that expansion is danger. The soul knows expansion is life. Every time you choose expansion, insecurity loses territory, not all at once but step by step. Rumi spoke of constancy as daily devotion. You seek confidence as if it were a shield. Real confidence is the absence of a shield. It is knowing you can be struck and still not abandon yourself. The ego calls this madness. The soul calls it freedom. And freedom does not coexist with chronic insecurity. One dissolves the other. Insecurity is also sustained by fear of losing bonds. The ego says that if you are true, you will end up alone. The soul knows that bonds built on masks are already loneliness. Rumi spoke of real companionship as the meeting of truths, not characters. When you choose the soul, some will drift away, others will draw closer. Insecurity diminishes because life becomes coherent. You feel resistance hearing this because the ego recognizes the threat. It prefers techniques, tips, shortcuts. The soul asks for surrender. Surrender is not weakness, it is alignment. And alignment creates a silent strength that does not depend on approval. This strength is the opposite of insecurity. You want to stop being insecure, but you still want to keep the character intact. That does not work. Something must fall. Rumi spoke of dying before dying so that life can begin. It is not physical death, it is the fall of the inner lie. Insecurity is the last scream of that lie trying to survive. As you read, something in you knows exactly where you have been betraying yourself. The ego tries to change the subject, rationalize, soften. The soul simply observes, steady. And perhaps the tension that lingers is not fear, but the beginning of a choice you have been postponing. The question that remains open is not what you will gain by listening to the soul, but what you still insist on losing by continuing to listen to the ego. You realize that insecurity does not diminish with time, because the ego does not learn. It only adapts. The more you try to strengthen yourself on the outside, the more fragile you become on the inside. The ego creates a false sense of progress, while the soul continues to be ignored. Rumi never spoke of evolution as accumulation, but as emptying. Insecurity grows when you try to become something and begins to fade when you stop pretending. Every time you stay silent to avoid conflict, something in you screams afterward. That scream turns into anxiety, doubt, fear. The ego calls this peace, but it is repression. The soul prefers uncomfortable truth to false tranquility. Rumi pointed out that true silence is not born from fear, it is born from wholeness. While you stay silent out of cowardice, insecurity seeps in like slow poison. The ego makes you believe you need to be accepted in order to exist. The soul knows you need to exist in order to be accepted. This inversion changes everything. Insecurity is the direct child of trying to earn space. When you occupy your space without asking permission, something reorganizes itself. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. The ego hates it because it loses the narrative of lack. You fear making mistakes because the ego turns error into identity. The soul sees error as movement. Where there is movement, there is life. Where there is rigidity, there is fear. Insecurity thrives in rigidity. Rumi spoke of fluidity as spiritual wisdom, not weakness. When you allow yourself to move, even incorrectly, insecurity loses its main argument. The ego wants you to believe that thinking more will solve everything. But overthinking is just another way of fleeing feeling. The soul does not think, it recognizes. And recognition does not generate doubt, it generates direction. Insecurity grows when you trade direction for excess analysis. Rumi called this getting lost in the marketplace and forgetting home. You notice that insecurity diminishes when you act in alignment, even without applause. This proves it does not depend on the world. It depends on your inner fidelity. The ego tries to convince you otherwise because it needs the world as a stage. The soul does not perform, it lives. When you stop performing, fear begins to starve. The ego strengthens itself when you explain yourself too much. The soul strengthens itself when you act simply. Simplicity is devastating to the false self. Rumi spoke of simplicity as the mark of truth. Insecurity cannot survive where there is no embellishment, justification, or defense. It needs stories to exist. You try to defeat insecurity, but it is not the enemy. It is a symptom. The real enemy is the inner lie you maintain for convenience. As long as that lie exists, fear returns. When it falls, something stabilizes. Sufism does not promise constant happiness, it promises coherence. And coherence generates a calm the ego cannot imitate. The ego fears the moment you trust without guarantees. That moment is your liberation. The soul does not demand heroism, it demands honesty. Rumi did not call this extraordinary courage, but a return to the essential. Insecurity loses strength when you return to the essential, because there is no room left for theater. You feel that something in you already knows all of this, not as an idea, but as an ancient memory. The ego tries to erase that memory with noise. The soul does not argue, it waits. And this waiting is not weakness, it is silent certainty. The longer you delay, the more insecurity insists, until you choose. Real confidence is not born when fear disappears. It is born when fear stops commanding. This is the point Rumi returned to again and again. The soul in command, the ego in the back seat. When this order is established, insecurity does not vanish overnight, but it stops being identity. It becomes only a passing signal, no longer a prison. Stopping insecurity is not about becoming stronger. It is about stopping self-abandonment. Trusting the voice of the soul is not mystical. It is practical, direct, and ruthless with the ego. As long as you live to protect the character, fear will govern. When you live from what is true within, insecurity loses the throne. Rumi did not offer comfort, he offered truth, and the truth is still calling now exactly where you are.